Thanks, Shannon. So welcome everybody. Here is today's agenda. We'll just go through a brief introduction, just an overview of the program. We'll go through reimbursement trends. So kind of looking into the past. We'll also look into the future with a FY21 outlook. We'll cover rate setting, annual cost report timeline. So just the general dates for the year, cost reporting, helpful hints, as well as desk review tips. And then we'll wrap up with some compliance reminders and program resources and contacts. So all throughout the training, definitely feel free to use that Zoom chat to ask any questions. And I'll pause whenever I see them and answer them. So here are the acronyms that are contained within this PowerPoint. If you are reviewing this PowerPoint a little bit later on, just know that they are here. And I will do my best to kind of spell each acronym out as we cover each one. It is sometimes a little bit kind of second nature just to say the acronym, but again, I will do my best. So just a brief overview of the program. Always keep in mind that it is a both federally and state funded program, and just kind of jumping down to the bottom graphic there, which is just a general timeline. Throughout the year, you are receiving monthly interim payments. That's a result of the interim rate setting that we'll cover a little bit later on. Then come August 1st of each year, that annual cost report will open up. This year's annual cost report opened up on August 6th, so that FY21 report is available for y'all to complete, and that is due on November 1st this year. Then come right around April to May of each year, as part of one of the last steps kind of within the year, those costs that you do report on your cost report are reconciled as part of the annual cost settlement process. So again, you should receive that notification typically between April and May of each year, but at the latest, June 30th. Okay, so some reimbursement trends. So kind of given everything that has happened during FY20 with COVID and that impact, we do always show this slide, but I feel like this slide is especially important with how FY20 went. So the FY20 reimbursement number you can see there at just over 55 million. So we did have just over a $7 million year-over-year increase in terms of reimbursement. And this is just your interim payments and your annual cost settlement. Those 4 quarterly MAC reports are not contained within these figures. So even without those, and given the COVID impact, we still had a pretty drastic increase. And you can kind of see that trend line all the way back from FY14 of kind of that upward trend. We'll go into a few different kind of items that may have enabled that increase and kind of helped us avoid a dip in this reimbursement number, but we'll cover that a little bit later on. So with this, we do kind of want to gauge everyone's reaction to that increase. Did you all kind of expect it? Are you surprised by it? And we'd like you can do it in 2 different ways. In your Zoom panel, if you hover over your screen, you should see a reactions option. You can either choose that or you can just type into chat as well. We have a fairly small group today. So again, we just want to gauge everyone's kind of reaction to that FY20 reimbursement number. Were you surprised? Were you kind of expecting it? I can say from our end, especially back in February or so, we were a little bit surprised when we calculated that cost settlement and really looked at that reimbursement number. I was definitely pleasantly surprised by it, but again, just want to gauge everyone's reaction. Again, either happy, Sarabelle, okay. Just give everyone maybe another minute or so, just to make sure everyone can find that Zoom chat. Again, if you're having trouble finding that reactions option, you can just type into chat. Higher than expected, okay. Little surprised. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So for the last, I would say this is the fourth time doing this training session. I think we've had kind of reactions all over the spectrum of very expected to very surprised. So it seems like everyone's pleasantly surprised, which is great to hear. Okay, so moving on. The next few slides are just going to go through the Medicaid allowable costs calculation. Whenever you hear Medicaid allowable costs, it's simply all your reported costs on the cost report after they've gone through all the various percentages and ratios. That will allow you to reach your Medicaid allowable costs figure. So first off is direct service. Step one is just going to take all that payroll information, salary, benefits, contracted costs that you put onto your cost report. Next, the unrestricted indirect cost rate is applied. That is district specific, and it is a added boost to your costs. Step three is just applying that direct medical time study percentage. So that's going to be a reduction. Step four is adding any materials, supplies, or other costs that you reported on your cost report. And then step five is applying that IEP ratio, which again is district specific. So if you were to follow all those steps, you would reach your direct service Medicaid allowable costs. And this next one is just going through transportation, how to reach your transportation Medicaid allowable costs. So step one is the same as the direct service in terms of those payroll costs. Step two is just adding in any other costs, so fuel, oil, maintenance and repairs, insurance, items like that. Step three is adding in any depreciation costs, so buses, vans, Suburbans, if you have them on your depreciation list. Step four is adding in that unrestricted indirect cost rate, so added boost to your cost. And then step five is applying the transportation services IEP students ratio. This is only applicable if your district reports not only specialized transportation. And then step six is applying that one-way trip ratio. So if your district reports not only specialized, you'll apply steps 5 and 6. If your district reports only specialized transportation, you would only apply step 6. You would skip step 5. And then we have free care. So free care is the first time you'll see free care on your annual cost report is actually on the FY21 report. That's the one you're currently completing now. Step one is the same as the other slides. Step two is applying that unrestricted indirect cost rate. Step three is where it's a little bit different from that direct service slide. Instead of applying that direct medical time study percentage, the free care RMTS percentage is going to be applied. And then step four, adding any materials, supplies, and other costs. Step five. Yeah, that was step four. Step five is applying that MER ratio or MER ratio. So in comparison to the direct service slide, step three and step five are different, just different ratios being applied, but again, the same general calculation. And this slide is kind of just putting together everything together from the last three slides. Steps 1 through 5 are coming from that direct service slide. That will get you to your direct medical allowable costs. Step 6 is bringing in that transportation Medicaid allowable costs. Same thing with step 7. So that's really just adding together the Medicaid allowable costs from the 3 different areas. And then step 8 is applying that federal medical assistance percentage, or FMAP for short. That runs on the federal fiscal year, which starts in October, which is why we have to apply 2 different percentages to each cost settlement. It'll always be at least 50%. It can definitely increase from 50%. Colorado is, for at least the last 2 to 3 years, has been right around or exactly at 50%. But it can surely be higher, just depends on the year. So if you were to follow all those steps, you would reach your gross cost settlement amount. And then if you wanted to figure out what your district is owed or what you owe back, that you would just apply, or you would subtract out 2.5%, which is that state withhold, and you would be left with that federal share. And the federal share is just what you are due, or what you owe back at the end of the year. So again, kind of follow all those steps and you would reach what your cost settlement is, or what it would be for the year. Okay, so kind of going back to that line graph that we were showing earlier with that FY20 reimbursement number. Just like we saw in the chat from everybody, everyone was pleasantly surprised, and we kind of wanted from our end to dive into it a little bit more and see what allowed for that year-over-year increase, kind of why we didn't have a dip or a decrease in that line graph. So first off, really only 4 months were impacted by COVID. Really started right around February. So we still had 8 months, you could say, of normal reporting, with 4 kind of districts going remote, and kind of everyone, I mean, really trying to figure out what needs to be done. So we still had 8 months, about 8 months of normal reporting, which definitely helped. Contracted costs and transportation costs were only slightly impacted. Transportation, obviously students probably were transported less and less, and before it completely stopped during those 4 months. But we only saw a slight impact of that. And then probably one of the biggest things is back in April of 2020, CMS did approve that emergency waiver to stop that AJ20 time study, and to use an alternate methodology to actually calculate that percentage. So after that approval, what was done, the AJ20 percentage was calculated using an average of OD19 and January through March of 2020, or JM20, those time studies. And what that ended up being, it was about the same, the FY20 time study percentage, which is that statewide average, was just about the same as the AJ20 time study percentage there. And if we looked at kind of a year over year look, it was about 1.62% higher than FY19. So all those kind of factors contributed to that continued upward trend in terms of reimbursement. But kind of as we go to FY21, things could definitely change a bit. So some factors to consider when kind of thinking about what the FY20 reimbursement number could look like. Salaried staff costs may not change significantly. We're kind of presuming districts will continue to pay those staff as noted in their contracts. Contracted staff costs may definitely be reduced. Again, with remote learning, again, that need for the contracted staff may have gone away a little bit or completely. So we are kind of expecting a reduction in that area. Transportation, direct medical, other costs are likely to decrease. Fuel and oil, purchase professional services are just, again, if a provider signs up for a concert, or not concert, a conference as it relates to their job function, those most likely were canceled. So we're not going to see many, again, purchase professional services costs, as a lot of things have been canceled across the country. And direct medical supplies. We've definitely heard in the last 3 sessions of this training that is one area that at least a few districts, there was just a large spending cut for the direct medical supplies area. And that would be direct medical other costs on the cost report. So yeah, fuel and oil, I mean, students not being transported, obviously during remote learning. So definitely transportation costs are very likely to decrease on that FY21 cost report. Overall, the direct medical time study percentage is expected to decrease. Again, with remote learning, only really a few different types of direct services could still be conducted through teletherapy. So it's still expected that that will decrease. And then IEP and transportation student utilization rate ratios are not expected to decrease because those are simply just really student counts at the end of the day. So still that one-way trips, again, remote learning, students not being transported, that one-way trips ratio or denominator could definitely decrease, as well as the numerator. All right, not seeing any questions so far. So going into, again, free care being new to the annual cost report for the FY21 year. This is just, again, preliminary RMTS percentages for free care. They're still being finalized, but this gives you a general idea of what it could look like. If you were to average these 3 quarters, it would amount to just about 3.97%. So once the percentage is finalized, you will see it on your cost report under, if you go to the annual drop down and then cost report, that's where you'll see the free care table and all the kind of how everything's being brought in, as well as that final percentage. Once we have it, we'll upload it. But ultimately with free care, there's no additional steps you all need to take. Everything is either going to be automated through the claiming system, and then with these percentages, PCG will upload those once they are available. And if you have any questions, just because it is so new, if you have any questions on where the numbers are coming from, once you kind of get further into your cost report, definitely don't hesitate to reach out and we can just walk you through pretty much that calculation, that Medicaid level cost calculation that we went through earlier. All right, not seeing any questions. So we're going to go into our breakout session for today. You may have participated in these during past trainings or past training sessions, but we really just want to have smaller groups to have kind of a smaller conversation, and then we'll bring everybody back to share what each group discussed. So Tracy is going to break us out probably into 2 to 3 groups, and your spokesperson, or the person who's going to share what the group talked about with the greater group, is going to be the person with the least amount of letters in their first name. So between like Joe and John, Joe would be the spokesperson.
All right, great. Yep. Thanks, John. So we'll go ahead and break you up into 2 rooms, and you'll get a quick invite. Just go ahead and click on that pop up, and I'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Okay, it looks like everyone is back in the main meeting room. So we'll go ahead and start off with room number 1, which was Lori's room.
And I've been delegated to, Lori, did you want to say something first?
No, I was just going to say, Ruth, that's all you.
Okay. So I feel like there was 3 of us only, and Garfield, RE2 went back pretty much immediately. They had only a delay of 1 week. And I'm not sure if she said it was made up after, but I don't think so. And we, Delta and Roaring Fork, where I am, we're kind of the same, kind of a slow back towards October, November timing. I believe that's what Delta said. And then we don't really feel like, I mean, the changes would be where some of the services may have been provided telehealth, some of the like direct speech services, but also, and I didn't mention this when we were in our group, but that our significant needs kids mostly were in person for most of the year. We tried to provide services in person to them as much as possible. in all three of our districts. So I feel like we're not expecting, and who knows what will actually happen, but that we're not really expecting any real significant changes.
Thank you, Ruth.
Did I cover everything?
You did. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to John's room.
Is that me?
That would be you, Sarah.
Hi, Tracy. So we were in person, our SLPs were virtual. And I really don't know what our percentage of RMTS ended up being at the end of the year. I was so COVID enmeshed that I didn't even think about it. So then Mindy was talking about that changes in her staff list were done by her, by the administration, and it really hurt them. And it hurt them as a district. And that they were a bit, and they started virtual, went hybrid, and then in person. And so she also said that that they were a little bit disappointed in free care, and thought they would get more from free care than they did. And so we asked Rose about our RMTS percentage, and she said it dipped last year. And that free care wasn't quite where they wanted it to be.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Any other feedback from room 2? No?
I think that was pretty much it.
All right, thanks, John. So that concludes the breakout sessions. We'll turn it back over to John to finish it up.
Oh, thanks, Tracy. So we're gonna do another really brief activity. Similar to that reaction button, you can either leave it if I get this drop down to work. It's under annotate, and then you can choose a stamp. You can either do that, again, that's annotate, and then there's a stamp drop down, or you can just type in your answer in the chat. That may be a bit easier, but we kind of want to gauge the room to see where you think the FY21 reimbursement will be. So we have FY21 here. We have, again, that 55 million from FY20 here. So again, you can either place a stamp anywhere over in this region where you think that FY21 reimbursement will be, or feel free to put in the chat. We have I have no idea. That's definitely pretty valid given the last 12 months, but looks like we have right at pretty much where FY20 was, a slight dip. So maybe where FY19 was with that 48 million, or maybe around 46 million. So same or slightly decreased. Okay. Yeah, so I think everyone's lower. Okay. I think everyone's pretty much thinking the same thing of that there will be a slight reduction. Might not be a drastic reduction, might just be kind of maybe in line with where we were at 2 years ago. But again, once we have those cost reports filled out for FY21, and we have those time study percentages finalized, we'll have a slightly better idea. But kind of over the next couple slides, we'll go through kind of the precautions that were taken with FY21, kind of to I guess you could say combat the possible reduction. So thank you all for participating in that, and being able to find that STAP button. We've had a little trouble with folks finding that. So again, thank you all for participating in there. And I'm just gonna find the clear button. Perfect. All right, so interim rate setting. So kind of, again, going back to one of the very first slides, prior to the start of every school year, PCG and the department go through the interim rate setting process. And the result of this is the final monthly interim payment amounts each district is set to receive. You always have what we essentially send you in your interim rate letter is just a recommendation. You always have the option of lowering whatever we are recommending. But a few other, I would say, precautions were taken that we'll go through on the next slide as well. But on top of the rate setting, another kind of review that we do is the mid-year interim rate review. That's done right around January of every year, pretty much halfway through the year. And this is where we'll take a look at current staff fullness levels for direct service. We'll also take a look at your two most recently completed MAC quarterly cost reports. So that's usually your July through September report and October through December report. And we'll take a look at those direct service costs. So again, we're using kind of the most recent data that we can to kind of get a somewhat decent picture of what your annual cost could look like. So kind of thinking back to that FY21 interim payment review, there were some added precautions taken during that review as well. So instead of using that statewide average direct service time study percentage that you typically see on your cost report, the OD20 preliminary time study percentage was used, which was a bit lower than what the annual average would have been. So as a result of this, and again, as a result of the mid-year rate review, we have a very rough idea, rough estimate of what your cost settlement could be. So as a result of using that OD20 percentage, 26 districts were flagged. I believe there were 57 total participating districts in FY21. So just about half were flagged as being in a possible recoupment situation if their current FY21 interim rates were to continue. So as a result of this, the department did reach out to those districts and offered kind of a few different possible solutions, or I guess solutions to reduce the possible risk of falling into a recoupment. And that was foregoing their interim payments either for 1 month to 4 months, depending on kind of the severity of the estimated recoupment. It could have been 1 month, again, it could have been 3 months, but the department did have that conversation with those districts. So again, kind of two precautions taken here, foregoing interim payments for at least 1 to 4 months, as well as using that OD20 percentage to highlight those 26 districts. So that precaution was taken. And then in terms of the FY22 interim rates, so those are the monthly interim payments that you are currently receiving. Two precautions were taken with this. First off, free care was included in calculating these monthly interim payments. We just took 1 percentage point away from what that calculated free care percentage was. So if it was 3.4, we used 2.4 as an example. And that was from that OD20 free care time study results that we went over a few slides ago. So that percentage that was on that graph, just again, minus 1 percentage point. And then again, that OD20 preliminary direct service time study percentage was used again as a secondary precaution as well. So in a perfect world, what this would mean is you all would just possibly receive a higher cost settlement come April or May of next year. Again, in a perfect world, if these precautions ended up not being needed, but we just felt with kind of how the second half of FY20 went, as well as FY21, the department wanted to take a few added precautions to hopefully, again, reduce the risk of a district falling into a recoupment situation. Any questions on any of those? Not seeing any. Okay. So we can just go into a general annual cost reporting timeline here. The cost report was opened up on August 2nd, and it is due on November 1st. So little less than, or 1 day less than 3 months to go ahead and complete your annual cost report. Again, if you have any questions as you're going through it and filling it out, please don't hesitate to reach out. And then desk reviews will start August 9th, and we're hoping to have those closed out by November 8th. So again, just like last year, those will be done on a rolling basis. So typically a few days after you certify your annual cost report, you'll receive your desk review, or that initial desk review notification from the claiming system. And then cost settlement, you'll receive that notification no later than June 30th of next year. Okay, so cost reporting helpful hints. So I kind of have said this the last couple of years, but it is very helpful of just that green job span bar that is on your salaried and contracted staff pages of the annual cost report. If you hover over that bar, you'll be able to see exactly when someone was placed on the direct service staff list and if they were ever removed during the year. That's especially important just because the annual cost report is done on a accrual accounting basis, meaning dates of service. So you can only report costs for services provided while on that staff list. So especially with FY21, always check with your HR department to ensure everyone that is showing up on your staff list, as well as the annual cost report, were there for the entire year. It's especially important to keep your staff list up to date because that is what sources the providers you see on your annual cost report. So it's especially important to, just like what was talked about in that RMTS Max session, of just putting in an end date if someone did leave the district midway through the year, and keeping that list up to date. And then lastly, just that last bullet at the bottom, always report any federal revenues, or make sure each federal dollar is captured on the cost report if you all did use federal funds. If you just received a grant and didn't allocate those funds yet during FY21, don't need to report those, but once you start using those, you'll need to report the funds used on that specific line in that federal revenues non-allowable cost field on the cost report. Direct medical other costs, same with payroll payroll costs, as well as really any item you see on your cost report. 100% net federally funded items or providers should not be reported on your cost report because you'll, at the end of the day, not receive any reimbursement for that. It'll just net out. And for each specific item, if you're having trouble kind of deciding if the item should be placed on your annual cost report, you can ask yourself these 3 questions, and it will typically lead you to the right answer of whether that item is allowable or not. If you're still not sure, even after these 3 questions, don't hesitate to give us a call and we can walk through that specific situation of how that item is being used, and if it is allowable. Transportation cost reminders. So similar to your transportation depreciation, your transportation payroll page rolls over from the previous annual cost report, meaning everyone that was on your FY20 transportation payroll page will show up on your FY21 transportation payroll page. So it's especially important to review that list and make sure, again, no one left the district that is on that list. If someone did leave, you can click that red X on the far right-hand side of that line, and it'll remove that bus aid mechanic or driver from your list. And similar to other pages on the cost report, you can use that import export feature, especially if you're a larger district, to add in your transportation payroll costs as well. Okay, moving on to the desk review. So very similar or somewhat similar to the comprehensive review. The desk review is where we're kind of just asking very specific questions within the PCG claiming system. We're not asking for any documentation, nor will we accept any documentation. It's just a general conversation of some things that we did notice. One thing I do want to note on this slide is as you're filling out your cost report, if you are asked to provide a explanation to a flag or warning, just know that what you put as your explanation does carry over to the desk review. And it allows us to close out a lot of edits prior to initially sending your desk review. So the more detail, again, if it is needed, whether it was a provider who's been with the district for 20 plus years, or if they do have a higher education, which kind of explains why they have a higher than expected salary. Just know that those explanations do carry over onto the desk review, and we can actually close out a lot of those desk review edit questions before sending out to y'all. Okay, so just some brief comprehensive review reminders and really just compliance reminders in general. Always review licensure dates prior to placing someone on your staff pool list. It's fine if their licensure lapses during the year as long as they renew it. Or if it lapses, you should just, and they're not going to renew it, or if there's a span where it's not renewed, you should be removing that person from your staff list. Always report costs to the penny, never round. And just know you can include bonus and extra duty pay, again, if it pertains to that individual's primary job function. With accrual and counting as well, always remember if someone leaves your district, you can include kind of any residual pay. So if someone leaves the district in May and their final paycheck or benefits aren't paid out until July, you should be including that onto your annual cost report totals. And especially with transportation, always make sure you're not including office supplies, car washes, staff meals, water cooler refills, uniforms, drug tests, things like that. Really, the motto is true of doesn't make the bus go. Really makes a item allowable. Just that mantra you can follow if you are unsure if an item is allowable for transportation. Okay, still no questions. So before I go over the next two slides, you should see a brief poll pop up on your screen with two questions. It's really just a check for understanding with this training. But if you could, please fill out that poll as I'm kind of going through these last two slides. We would really appreciate it. But in terms of program resources, here you'll have the website for the SHS program, as well as a PCG claiming system. And then on the PCG claiming system, you'll have all of these resources in this gray box. The program calendar contains all the due dates for that fiscal year. So right now it's updated for FY22. So you'll have due dates for cost reports when they're set to be opened, staff list due dates, really all the important dates for the fiscal year. And then once we're kind of wrapped up with these trainings, probably in 7 to 10 days, maybe, these training resources will be uploaded to the SHS website as well. And then here we just have contact information for Shannon at the department, as well as the annual and RMTS and MAC help desk at PCG. So you have our email addresses and phone numbers If you all have any questions at all throughout especially with the annual side with over the next 3 months, please don't hesitate to reach out. No matter how small the question is, and we'll try to do our best to get those questions answered. And we have the results of the poll. Okay, so the first question was, all direct service provider costs are included in the free care reimbursement calculation. So this is true. So the best really visual representation of this is, again, on your annual cost report page. You'll see that all the payroll costs for each job category under direct service is going to be brought down into that free care table. Again, the only thing that is changing between the two calculations are those two ratios. Instead of that direct medical time study percentage, that free care time study percentage is being used. And instead of that IEP ratio, that MER ratio is being applied. So still using the same reported costs, just a couple different percentages and ratios to get to your free care Medicare level costs. And then question number 2, everyone got it right. Direct medical other costs are allowable when used in the provision of a direct medical service, even if not included on an IEP or other plan of care. So this is false. So the service that the item is being used for, that direct service, does need to be prescribed in that student's IEP. One question I have gotten over the last year a couple of times is, does that specific item need to be listed in the student's IEP? Meaning if a therapy wedge is being used, say for physical therapy, does that therapy wedge need to be listed in that student's IEP? And it doesn't. Again, you just have to be able, that direct service has to be listed, and pertaining to that item, you have to be able to kind of draw that line of how that item is being used in the provision of that direct medical service. So everyone got that right. So again, it was true for number 1 and then false for number 2. So with that, that's really it for the training in terms of the PowerPoint deck. I'll hang on the line for a few more minutes. If anybody does have any remaining questions, you can come off mute if you want and ask your questions. If you're more comfortable just ask him after the fact, definitely use these email addresses to reach out to us. But thank you everybody for attending today, and we hope to hear from you.
Thanks, John. And everyone, if you have questions about any of the sessions you attended, please feel free. We have everyone represented, so happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, have a great day and start of the school year.
Thank you. I actually have one quick question. Wait till the last minute. It seems like last year our, and I didn't do the RMTS training. I didn't go to that. Probably the other person, our coordinator, went to that, but she had put like the end date when somebody quit or was done working at the end of the year at like June 2nd or whatever our last day of school was. So then there, and I feel like he kind of answered, John already answered this, that we report costs through the end of the year because our school does accrual through August. So our payment is actually September through August for, our payroll for our typical staff. So, but if their end date was in June, then they wouldn't actually be on the July through September.
Right. Yeah. If it was June of 2020, then you're right, they wouldn't show up on the FY21 report. I guess, are you asking if there's residual pay? How do you report that? Maybe.
Well, I mean, what I did for last year's cost report is even though their pay was July, August, they were paid, their final pay was in August. I reported that whole cost, even though their end date was in June.
And John, not to interrupt, but I think it's June of the prospective year. So, or their payment is August of the prospective year. So for 2021, for example, they might get paid now in August 2021 when their end date was June 2020. And for the annual cost report, which is an accrual cost reporting requirement, you can report those costs associated with work performed in 2021. Now, they will not be in the quarterly cost report, but the quarterly cost report is reported on a cash basis anyway. So you can only report pay periods in those quarters. Does that make sense? Or does that complicate it for you?
No, I think that makes sense. I just feel like, I mean, is that actually necessary to even say that that person's end date was in June? Because
Yes. So the end date drives the moments in that quarter and also the time frame eligibility, right, for cost reporting. So if they truly were terminated from your district on June 2nd, we'll say, then that end date is appropriate and should be their last day of work. In terms of reporting their pay, if you do have final payouts that are paid after, you know, even the fiscal year end that are associated with the previous fiscal year, though, they are still allowable
okay,
on the annual cost report. Yeah.
on the annual, right? Okay, I think I got it. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else have any other questions? See, a couple of you are still on. All right, well, it's 4 o'clock and it's the last training of the year, but these will be recorded. So email us if you have any other questions.